and welcome to the Farming Week, the podcast from Agriland that keeps you up to date with all the latest in Irish agriculture. I'm Francess McDonnell, and joining me on this episode is my colleague Aisling O'Brien. It's been a week of protests, pledges and future payment possibilities, thanks to a new tranche of the Targeted Agriculture Modernisation Scheme, better known of course to us as TAMS 3. That's going to be for storm damage on farms, and we're going to get to that in a moment. But first of all, we're going to talk about protests, where we saw farmers from every corner of the country descend on the doorstep of the Department of Agriculture's headquarters in Dublin to highlight their concerns about good agricultural and environment conditions. GAEC 2. Aisling, what brought these farmers to Dublin?
Yeah, so let's take a step back and talk about what GAEC 2 is first, and then maybe why the farmers did take to the streets, Francis. So GAEC stands for Good Agricultural and Environmental Conditions, and this is the second one of them, GAEC 2, and it's all to do with protecting peatlands and wetlands. And it's one of two new conditionality standards for the 2025 BIS, which of course is the Basic Income Support for Sustainability, the main direct payment that farmers will get every year. So GAEC 2 is essentially a baseline minimum requirement to protect carbon-rich soils. And in this country, the grass-based system already provides considerable protection for these types of soils. And they're also protected by existing national planning provisions, for example, on drainage as well. So the Department of Agriculture, Francess, has said that farmers impacted by this conditionality will be notified in due course of the land parcels that are affected and the obligations that will be attached to them. And the department maintains that the introduction of this standard is expected to have minimal impact on farmers' day-to-day operations. And it said that in practice, it's only at the point where a farmer wants to carry out drainage, reseeding of grassland or deep ploughing that farmer will need to check if the land parcel in question falls under GAEC 2. So, as you said, farmers from across the country gathered outside Ag House in Dublin, of course, the home of the Department of Agriculture. And this protest was organised by the Irish Natura and Hill Farmers Association, also known as the INHFA. Now, that organisation believes that the government is unjustly proposing a definition for the standard of GAEC 2. And they say by doing that, they're actually sacrificing farmers along primarily the Western Seaboard. Now, the INHFA president, Vincent Roddy, said that if GAEC 2 is applied as it's currently being proposed by the Irish government, it will see over 100,000 hectares of mineral soils being wrongly, in their opinion, classified in this EU standard, which they say should only be for peatlands and wetlands. And Roddy said that this will impact up to 35,000 farmers who will, they believe, have additional restrictions that are going to undermine their farming. And it will also, they believe, increase planning difficulties on all of those lands. And they feel that 100,000 hectares should not be included. So on Tuesday of this week, the INHFA, who were joined by a number of politicians, it has to be said, took to the streets. And the livestock chair with the association, Brendan Joyce, told Agriland that the farm organisation wanted an urgent meeting with Minister for Agriculture, Food and the Marine, Martin Hayden, on GAEC 2. Take a listen.
They have said that this won't interfere with farming. Yes, you can open existing drains, you can plough down to a depth of 300 mil. But if you have to open a new drain on this GAEC 2 land, you have to go for planning permission. If you want to build any extension to a shed or a building in the future, that's subject now to planning permission. And yes, GAEC 2 was brought in to deal with peatlands and wetlands. It was not brought in to deal with mineral soils. We have requested an urgent meeting with the Minister. That's for him to deliver on, but we are certainly hopeful for a meeting very, very shortly to deal with this. And I think with the support we're getting from the politicians on this, they now understand the implications this has for a lot of rural communities.
Now, in a letter to Minister Hayden before the protest, the INHFA stated that the European Commission had provided Ireland with a 2-year period to identify peatland and wetland areas, and it allowed for comprehensive mapping to take place as well. And the INHFA claims that after investing significant amounts of time and money and resources into this process, the department and the minister have chosen to disregard the outcome in order to, what they claim, is to protect the interests of intensive agriculture and forestry at the expense of farmers along the West Coast. And the INHFA is also planning to write a similar letter to the EU Commissioner for Agriculture and Food, Christoph Hansen, to highlight their concerns. Now, Independent Ireland TD Michael Fitzmaurice, he has been voicing concerns about GAEC, to be fair, for a number of years now, and he was among the politicians who were at the protest this week, Francess. And he believes that farmers actually don't realise the consequences of what's going on in this country at the moment. And another politician who was at the protest was AIM2 TD Paul Lawless from Mayo. And he said that this is nothing more than a government land grab. He believes it goes far beyond the EU requirements, and it's unfairly sacrificing small family farmers, predominantly in the West, in order to protect intensive agriculture and big business interests, according to him.
But we've had a pledge on this from the Minister for Agriculture in the Dáil, haven't we, Aisling?
Yes, that's true, Francis, because the issue was raised on Wednesday in the Dáil by Independent Kerry TD Danny Healy-Rae directly with Minister Hayden. And Deputy Healy-Rae pointed to the INHFA's concerns that payment rules are going to be affected by these new GAEC 2 proposals. And he pleaded with the ministers in the Department of Agriculture, of course, one of whom is his brother Michael, and the Taoiseach to consider this. And Deputy Danny Healy-Rae said it looks as though this proposal came from the Greens, and he said he wanted it stopped. Now, Minister Hayden, in response, reassured Deputy Healy-Rae that the proposals will not have negative impacts for farmers. And he said he accepted the points of concern raised by the INHFA, but he said he disagreed with them. And he said that this is an approach that will allow farmers in GAEC 2 areas who have more than 50% of peat in their soil to continue their normal agricultural activities, continue to plough, reseed and maintain drains, and have new drainage in line with existing national planning legislation. Here's some of what he had to say.
My department is working on examining the potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions through reduced management intensity of grasslands on drained organic soils. This work is at an early stage, and any potential future actions from this analysis will be entirely voluntary. I can't be any clearer than that. Anything farmers want to do here, they'll only do it if they want to, and if they're financially incentivised to do it. Voluntary.
And that was the Minister for Agriculture early this week on GAEC 2. So while we'll be keeping a very close eye on this, there may be some better news for farmers around the corner with future payment possibilities, thanks to the announcement this week that a new tranche of TAMS 3 will open shortly. Why is that happening, Aisling?
Yes, Francis. Well, Storm Éowyn did wreak a path of destruction for many people, unfortunately, in January with those really, really high gusts that we saw right across the country, causing a lot of damage to farms out there. So in response to that, Minister Hayden this week has announced a new tranche of TAMS for storm damage on farms, as you said. So this is going to be a 3-week tranche, and it is going to open immediately after the current tranche, which of course is tranche 6, closes tomorrow, which is Friday, the 7th of March, and it will then run until Friday, March 28th. So that is the 3-week period you have to keep in mind if you want to apply. Now, there are specific items for which applications will be accepted by the department over this period. Those are backup PTO generators, sheep, cattle and equine fencing, wood and biomass chippers and mulchers. And as this tranche is specifically in place to deal with the effects of Storm Éowyn, the Minister said he will ensure that all of those applications are going to be processed as a priority. Now, following on from the recent power outages arising from the storm damage, and we saw the importance of generators on farms, Francis, and many of the farm organisations had come forward and asked for a change in the rules when it came to grant aid on generators. Well, the Minister has confirmed that he's reviewed the scope of generators supported by TAMS to include now all generators, irrespective of the drive mechanism. So he said that the grant is targeted at the generator rather than the drive mechanism, which will mean that the likes of diesel generators will be included now, which will come as a relief to many farmers out there. So that investment is going to be open to all farmers who declare the minimum eligibility requirement of 5 hectares under BIS in the year of application or in the preceding year. So this year or last year, if you declared at least 5 hectares under BIS, you'll be able to apply. And we were told there's no requirement to be milking cows to be eligible for backup generators under the scheme. So it applies to all farmers, not just dairy farmers. And look, as the cleanup is continuing out there after the storm, the minister also said there is an increased demand for wood chippers and mulchers. And he said both of those are actually mobile investments. So as such, under TAMS, farmers are permitted to purchase the equipment at their own risk. And once they've submitted an online application, then that application will be processed through the normal way that it would be through TAMS. So if that's something that applies to you, that can also go in under this special tranche, this mini tranche of TAMS. Now, the minister did say that there was, significant damage done to the farming sector in general, and he urged farmers to look at these supports. But he also did say, interestingly, Francess, that many farm buildings were significantly damaged. We did see roofs off sheds getting absolutely destroyed, like tin cans being opened by Storm Éowyn out there. And the minister said in such cases, it is open to farmers to apply for support for the construction of new buildings under TAMS. But he said to ensure that farms are more resilient in advance of future weather events, he intends to introduce grant aid support under TAMS for replacement of roofs. And he said the application process for that specific investment is going to be available later this year when the systems are developed by the department. Now, just before we leave TAMS, Francess, if you did make an application under Tranche 5, the minister has also confirmed that all eligible applications under that tranche will be approved. There was some 5,823 applications made under Tranche 5. We await to see how many are made under Tranche 6. We'll bring you that figure as soon as we get it from the department. But to date, under TAMS 3, we've just shy of 33,000 applications. So it shows the popularity of the TAMS scheme. And the next regular tranche, which of course will be Tranche 7, which will cater for all TAMS applications. And it includes that new nutrient storage grant as well, which we spoke about previously on the podcast, is set to open on March 29th once this small 3-week tranche specifically for storm-related damage closes. And then Tranche 7 will close on the previously announced date of June 6th. And the minister said that there will be no impact on the agreed timelines as a result of this new smaller tranche being announced in response to Storm Éowyn. So it is of interest out there, Francess. A lot of damage was done by the storm. And look, a lot of farmers thinking to the future as well. Maybe you might want to invest in a generator, and this might be a cost-effective way to do it.
I suppose we should acknowledge that really the storms was the first test for this new team at the department, and they've listened, it appears, to what farmers and farm organisations were asking them to do.
Well, I think, the flexibility with the generators definitely is kind of a concession towards what the farm organisations were saying. I think, look, it was an unprecedented storm. We see the headache that it has left for Minister of State Michael Healy-Rae and the forestry side of the house. But I think like looking towards the future and getting more resilience and that grant possibly for roof repair, that is a very interesting approach as well. And as you say, the department are listening on this one.
Now, another big test, and it's been in the headlines for a long time, is water quality and the nitrates derogation. And DAFM has confirmed the changes to the Nitrates Action Programme, which will affect organic manure, nitrogen and the nitrates derogation. So tell us more about that development, Aisling.
Yeah, so as part of our deal, I suppose, with the European Commission, there was an interim review of the 5th Nitrates Action Programme. That Nitrates Action Programme, or NAP, runs until the end of this year. Now, the interim review has concluded and there has been a signing into law now of a revised regulation. And that's what the department was outlining this week. It's a little bit complicated, Francess. So if people don't catch it here on the pod, make sure to log on to Agriland and you can go through everything if it's something something that does impact you in particular. So the regulation includes a number of strengthened and new measures, which the department said were developed in consultation with the Nitrates expert group, as well as members of the Agriculture Water Quality Working Group. Now, the changes are going to see revised nutrient excretion rates for calves to reflect their lower nutrient output, especially in the first 90 days of life. Nutrient excretion rates for other cattle aged less than 1 year and for 1 to 2 year old cattle are also updated to, I suppose, reflect the latest research that we're getting back from GAEC. The changes are also going to recognise the lower nitrogen excretion rate achieved by dairy farmers who opt to manage crude protein in concentrate feed to their cows across the year. The maximum crude protein content allowed in concentrates fed to cattle aged 2 years and over at grass between April 15th and September 30th is going to be reduced by 1% down to 14%, and that requirement will now apply to all farmers. And the changes will also see the introduction of a provision which will allow the maximum nitrates derogation stocking rate to reduce to 220 kilograms of organic nitrogen per hectare in areas where the Environmental Protection Agency has identified a need for nitrate reduction measures as a priority to improve water. But that were not considered, I suppose, by the European Commission's criteria for the 2-year review. And we did see changes that came into force, bringing areas down to the 220. So for those additional areas, the lower stocking rate limit will apply from December 25. And the Department of Agriculture said that they are going to write shortly to farmers who may be impacted by that change. There's also going to be a 5% reduction in the chemical nitrogen allowance for grassland on higher stocked farms, as well as a new lower chemical nitrogen allowance for extensively stocked livestock farms as well. When it comes to the use of unprotected urea in granular form, I suppose to facilitate the use of existing stocks, the restriction on that is going to apply from September 15th of this year. An application of urea in liquid form will still be permitted. So if you've unprotected urea in granular form, keep that in mind. I suppose the cutoff for using of that is September 15th. So that is of note as well. And for nitrates derogation applicants, the maximum stocking rate will be limited to 170 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare for land more than 30 kilometres as the crow flies from the main farm holding, unless evidence is provided to the department to show that this land is being farmed at an appropriate higher level. And look, I suppose to stay with the nitrates derogation, Francess, as well, Minister Hayden brought a memo to Cabinet this week, which we're told outlined a roadmap to secure the renewal of Ireland's nitrates derogation. And of course, as I said, our derogation, it's due to expire at the end of this year, and securing this renewal, it has been a key priority for the government parties. It was mentioned numerous times during the election campaign, and it is included as a priority in the programme for government as well. But it has been acknowledged by the government that this is not going to be an easy task. We need to convince the European Commission that Ireland is taking effective steps out there to improve water quality if we are to get the derogation extended as well, and that we can convince our fellow EU member states that we meet the criteria, so to speak. So Ireland is set to make presentations to the EU's Nitrates Committee in March, June and September of this year, setting out our case. And what we've been told is that Ireland's 6th Nitrates Action Programme will be central to underpinning our case for the renewal of the derogation. And what we were told this week is that work has commenced on the 6th NAP, and it will be developed over the coming weeks in consultation with farm and industry stakeholders through that Agriculture Water Quality Group. And the work of this body will feed into the newly established Cabinet Committee on Water Quality, which is due to hold its first meeting in April as well. So a lot of news on the nitrates front this week, Francess.
Yeah, and we've constantly been reporting about how the question marks over the future of the nitrates derogation has been a factor in pushing up land prices in some areas around the country. And we've seen more evidence of this now in 2 new reports from both the Institute of Professional Auctioneers and Valuers and the latest survey conducted among the Real Estate Alliance auctioneers. And you can read more about that on our app or on Agriland.ie. But we're going to turn now to a subject, unfortunately, that never seems to go away these days, and in fact appears to be getting worse in some parts of the country, and that's the number of herds coming down with TB. A new survey carried out by the Irish Creamery Milk Suppliers Association has provided a good insight into what farmers really think about what needs to be done now about TB. So what did we learn from that, Aisling?
Yeah, so 550 farmers took part in this survey, Frances. And I suppose very interesting to kind of get the mood music amongst farmers, because we are hearing that, there are changes going to be coming. The Department of Agriculture has said it on numerous occasions that we need to change our approach to TB in this country. We've seen the reactor rates going up. We've seen herd incidence rates going up, and the number of farms that are locked up with TB is increasing as well. And we don't need to go over the ground of how upsetting that is for farmers on the ground. So back to this survey results. So when asked if farmers would support increased movement restrictions, 18.6% of respondents said they definitely would. 35.5% of farmers said they probably would, which means that just over 54% of the people who took part in this survey indicated support for tighter movement controls as a way to curb the spread of TB. Now, on the flip side, 24% said they probably would not support increased restrictions, and just under 22% said they definitely would not support them. And farmers were also asked, Frances, if they would support a maximum of 2 movements per TB test. That would mean essentially once an animal has moved twice, then it has to be tested for TB again before a further movement can take place. And actually a significant majority of respondents, over 3/4, some 76%, said that they would actually support that type of a policy, but just over 24% said they would not support it. And when it came to cattle dealers and cattle movements, just over 80% of farmers believe that rules should be tightened in relation to dealers on cattle movements, saying that those rules should be tightened up, and just over 19% said that they shouldn't be. And look, I suppose it was a wide-ranging survey, Frances, and the issues of animal health came up wider in terms of vaccination and what farmers are vaccinating for. You can read about that on our app and on our website. But just speaking about the nitrates derogation and returning to our previous item briefly, the survey found that around 1/5 of dairy farmers who took part said that they would actually reduce the number of cows they had by up to 1/4 if Ireland's nitrates derogation is not renewed. And 6% of the farmers said that they would actually cease dairy farming altogether if the derogation wasn't removed. And you can read more about that, as I said, on Agriland. A very interesting survey by ICMSA, really, I suppose, taking the pulse of farmers out there in a couple of crucial areas and crucial topics at the moment.
Yeah, and let me just tell you very briefly about some of the other stories you can find out about on our app or on our site and that we've been covering. This includes the latest about the new dairy co-op, Arabon Tipperary Cooperative Society. The new co-op has 1,400 dairy farmer suppliers, with the new dairy business a merger of Arabon Co-op and Tipperary Co-op. And the new venture is saying that this consolidates the future of dairy farming for those farmers that are now part of it. And of course, there's also the latest on the Macra election, with the candidates now confirmed for the Macra presidential and vice presidential races. Ballot papers will be issued to clubs throughout Ireland who are eligible to vote on the 14th of March. So do check out who is in the running. Now, he may still be relatively new in the job, but Minister of State at the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine, Michael Healy-Rae, is in no doubt where he stands on live exports. Tell us, Aisling, what he was telling you earlier this week.
Yeah, so the Minister of State was actually attending the AgriAware Farm Walk and Talk series at the Salesian Agricultural College in Pallaskenry in County Limerick. He's actually a former pupil of the college. He spent a year there, and he said that the yards that we were standing in while doing the interview, he remembered coming up there to milk cows and to drive an old Massey Ferguson as well. So it's a place he's very fond of. And he praised the work of AgriAware in educating young people about what goes on inside the farm gate. And he spoke about, disinformation and about, I suppose, making sure that people really know what is going on. And he told the secondary school students who came from a number of counties across the country to this event that protecting live exports is among the issues that he is personally very fundamental about, Frances. And he said, whatever you listen to, and he said, whatever you listen to and whatever type of things that you'll hear going on, always remember that you're living on an island and you have to export. and the best way to export is exporting live. And as you said, I caught up with him afterwards, and he said he wasn't going to mince his words on this. We're an island nation, and he really does believe in our live exports. And he also said he's every confidence in Irish shippers, purchasers and hauliers. Have a listen.
99.9% of the people that are involved in agriculture, whether it's production, whether it's haulage, or whether it's export, they have one thing in common, and that is the minding of that animal. Because at the end of the day, that animal is our livelihood. And of course, we're going to have antis, but sure, we have people that think that we shouldn't be producing anything. But the last time I checked, the population of the world will have to eat. We need dairy produce, we need beef, we need sheep, we need pig meat, we need to eat food. And food has to be produced, and it has to be exported, and it has to be taken around the world.
So yeah, definitely not holding back there, Minister of State Michael Healy-Rae, Francess. And I suppose, look, we're pointing to the economics of this as well. Bord Bia have said that the value of live exports of animals from Ireland stood at €340 million during 2024, which is actually up 30% nearly on the previous year's levels. But of course, it has been noted by Bord Bia and others that the live trade of animals remains under intense scrutiny, both at home and at the European level. And of course, there are proposed changes on the table at the moment in the EU around transport legislation when it comes to journey times, feeding intervals, the age of transport, space allowances. And there is a risk that could negatively impact the longer term future, especially for the unweaned calf trade in particular out there. So it is something that's very much a hot topic, Francess, and it's something that is being discussed under the current EU presidency as well. And, it's something that we'll have to keep a very close eye on.
Yeah, he's not the only politician, of course, that has highlighted this issue. We've heard it both in Europe and much closer to home. But as you say, there's definitely a spotlight on it at the moment and where it's going to go in the future.
Absolutely. We've heard from our MEPs as well. You know, a lot of them have pledged their support to continue live exports from Ireland. I suppose a lot of people would say it's crucial on an island to make sure there's another outlet for animals as well. It improves competition and everything like that. But look, as Minister Healy-Rae did note, there has been issues highlighted with issues around transport. And we have seen, various television programs and footage that, left a lot to be desired as well out there. But as the Minister said, the vast majority, 99.9% of people involved in the agriculture sector, look after their animals as well.
Yeah. And finally, just before we wrap on this episode, I know it may be a time of year when some people have decided to give alcohol a break, but why has one farmer organisation suggested this week that there may be a way to support farmers by buying a pint, Aisling?
Yes, well, the Irish Grain Growers Group have come out this week, Francess, and they've called on the drinks industry to support their farmer suppliers better. And they claim that the economic aspect of sustainability, so essentially the cost of making those environmental changes that are expected of farmers, has been essentially ignored by the industry. And the IGG also claimed that the recent forward price offer for this year for malting barley from Bort Malt flies in the face of the economic pillar of sustainability. And what they said was the reality is that 1 cent of the retail price of a pint directed back towards those barley growers would transform their income. And they're encouraging the Irish drinks industry to intervene and to request that Bort Malt reconsider their offer to farmers. So we'll see where that goes. But something to keep in mind, as I said, if you are going out for maybe a few pints for that crucial Ireland-France match this weekend, if you haven't given it up for Lent.
And check out, we have a lovely video there that introduces you to the new chair of the IGGG, and you can hear all about what his plans are whenever he's taken over the chair and what he wants to do there. So unfortunately, Aisling and I could stay all day here with you talking about issues around Agriland and what we've been covering. But for now, we're going to have to say goodbye. So thank you from both of us for listening. And please don't forget to rate, review and follow The Farming Week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And we hope you have a really good week ahead.